Welcome to the New Kind of Man podcast. And today we have the special treat of having a conversation and digging into some psychology with Michael Pfaff. How are you, Michael?
Doing well, all things considered.
Yeah. We're at time of recording. We are right in the COVID-19 crisis, and we're both having our struggles through it, but we were able to sit down and have this conversation. This is actually take two. So the first time, it actually didn't work. I had an emergency in my home, so I thank you for being gracious enough to come back on.
Sure. Glad to be here.
And you have a master's degree in depth psychology, right?
That's correct. Out of Pacifica University in California.
Yeah. So it was really interesting, and I connected with you on Instagram, and we were kind of chatting back and forth. And then once I knew about your field, I have a general interest in psychology. And then specifically, there's the bit of the masculine archetypes that I was really interested in. And so that ultimately is what we're going to talk about. But before we get into any of that other stuff, Michael, what I want to give you is the fast five. Now, these 5 questions are just kind of punchy. You don't even have to think about them. Whatever's on the top of your head. We're not going to judge you very much. Just whatever's there, just spit it out. All right. So
sounds great.
First question is this: what was your favorite military movie?
And I spent a lot of time watching this Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, excellent. Disturbing, but excellent.
Oh, very much so.
Man.
A lot of psychology going on in that movie.
For sure. And another question is this: if you could apprentice under anyone in history, who would it be?
Can I give 2 answers?
Of course.
Yeah. The first one, and kind of in the modern times, Tony Robbins. I really admired his work. His ability to get to the root of what is going on in someone's life is unparalleled that I have ever seen. And I would say more historically, Carl Jung. Just some big breakthrough ideas that changed psychology and changed civilization as far as I'm concerned. Be amazing to study with the master.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a really slow learn for me. So we just sit all right, break this down to kindergarten level so I can understand it. But
and it's going to take an apprenticeship. You're not going to stop by for coffee.
That's right. So what is something that, in the season of, there's so much going on, and division and the, pandemic, all of these things, but I just wanted us to pause today, and I just want to ask you this question: what is something you're thankful for?
Right now, I know a lot of people are struggling in terms of a job. And so for me, I have what I would call a day job. I'm 9 to 5. I work in IT for a bank. And so a lot of people, including my girlfriend, are out of work right now. That's the nature of how the economy has shifted. So I'm thankful for a job. I'm thankful for something that puts a roof over my head right now.
Yeah, that's right. And you also do some coaching on the side, right?
Yes, I do. Yes. So I am growing my men's coaching practice. I'm excited, even in this time of crisis, to be able to reach out and to serve and to help men better their lives.
Awesome. And that's a mission I can get behind. That's the reason why I have this podcast, and that I have the work that I'm doing as well is to help men to become great. That's kind of the mantra, and my vision is that I want to help men to become great, because when men become great, there's form into great marriages, and then great families and great communities and great communities and great nations. And ultimately that we can change the world, but it starts with us, right?
Right. It starts with each one of us. I agree.
Yeah. Doing our part, even if we think it's insignificant. You just never know what the impact is going to be.
Sure, and let that ripple out. Yeah.
So another question I was going to ask you, what, do you listen to podcasts for one?
Yes.
All right. What would be a podcast or 2 that you would go to on a regular basis?
Right. So unsurprisingly, me doing men's work and being involved with coaching men, there's a couple of good ones that I listen to. The first one would be The Art of Manliness.
Yep. Brett McKay.
That's just an excellent, and he has a lot of good stuff. I like a lot of times he does things from a historical perspective. Like, how did the Spartans handle male initiation?
Right.
For example. Yeah. Another good one would be The Order of Man, Ryan Mickler, and his stuff. I would say those are kind of my 2 go-tos. I tend to do podcasts for more of like an instructional or learning place, not so much the entertainment side, I would say.
Right.
I like to learn, and those are great. You know, I can put that on while I'm in the car, even when I'm at work sometimes, and learn something while I'm doing my thing.
Yeah, that's about the same with me. I tend to kind of stay into things, you know, like a self-help model, you know, so I'm just kind of, okay, what can I listen to that's going to impact me either in a big or, you know, not as significant way in that moment, but something that's going to kind of challenge me. And I figured it's just kind of the way that I'm wired is to be a self-starter and not to waste a lot of time. So if I can listen to a podcast to give me some nuggets, then I can be on my way and gather some more somewhere else. So.
Right. Keep on moving. Sure.
So you help and you coach men. I want to ask you this. This is the last question as far as the Fast Five. What's the best part of being a man?
And it's interesting, and I felt this a bit more in the last few days and weeks, but the idea of being a protector.
Yeah.
It's like standing strong for who and what you believe in and being a protector of that. Yeah. So my girlfriend has a compromised immune system. So I am very aware of the washing of the hands, and I take that very seriously. And I'm talking to the guy next to me at the sink in the bathroom saying, "Hey man, please wash your hands." You know, that kind of thing. And so that protection of her feels strong and good in me as a man.
Yeah. And that's a great thing. I remember when, I still do this to some degree, but when my wife was on dialysis, we were doing dialysis at home because she had kidney disease, and we kind of went through that before she received her transplant. And I had kind of that same feeling, you know, it's making sure, you know, times where she was, you know, just kind of emotionally down, that I had to be strong and say it's going to be okay, and help hook the machine up and do whatever needed done. And that's kind of, you know, I kind of lean into the servant leader. You know, the man is the best part about a man, from my perspective, is being a servant leader. And, you know, it's great when you have those opportunities to serve. And it sounds like that, Michael, you've done that. You are doing that, and you've done that well. So
I've been honored to do so. I've been grateful to do so, for sure.
Yeah. Good for you, bro. Good for you. So much of the conversation where we're going to go from here is having to do with the book King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover. We're discovering archetypes of the mature masculine. And it is deeply psychological. And we are going to talk some about that. But I was hoping that we'd be able to tee up a conversation to just kind of maybe show the high points of it, but then also maybe if we could show guys practically how they can seek to develop in these areas. Are you up for that?
Absolutely, yeah. These are definitely things that have applied throughout time, and that includes modern times and today.
Right. So, because people don't typically use the word archetype, what does that mean as far as in the realm of this book and our conversation?
Sure. So, an archetype is a formation of an image. It's a thing that you somehow almost instinctively know of, but it's almost like the more you try to put your finger on it, the harder it is to get to define.
Okay.
So if I was to say something like truth or love, like those are things that, like, when we hear that, we know that we almost have a reaction to that word.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was to say, well, I need you to exactly define what love is, it's actually somewhat challenging. But that archetype Jung called it a constellation of energy. A set of ideas and images that make up this thing that we somehow identify with, even if we can't necessarily literally define.
Okay. Yeah, and that helps kind of frame up kind of where we're going. And I think of the word love, and, you know, even the word love, for us, we use the word love, but in the Greek language, there are multiple words that we would translate into love, and the same type of love of a sacrificial love, and then a love that would be more like eros, the passion type of love. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, phileo would be like Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. So there would be like just that kindred brotherly love aspect of it. And there's another one as well. I can't think of off the top of my head, but I believe there's 4 main ones. So that kind of makes sense. And I think in the English language, sometimes we just kind of whitewash things to where we're like, oh, that's love. But yet, to your point, when you see it, you know what it is.
Exactly. Like, you may have different kind of permutations of it, but it's definitely not hate, for example, which is another strong, like, archetypal kind of word. It's a word that, I use the term energy, it carries a lot of energy with it. So another couple of good examples would be like father.
Right.
Whether it's like the all father of Odin, or God as a father in heaven, or a father to children. There's definitely like a father energy that we recognize.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And even the word father, unfortunately, that word father can change depending upon how well you were fathered.
Sure.
Because
sure.
then we form. I'm sorry.
Yeah, your reaction to it can be very different. That can be something that you look upon with fondness and love, or it can be something that you retract and pull back, and that doesn't feel very good.
Right.
But you know what it is.
Right. So where did these ideas originate? The idea of the archetypes themselves, where did they originate?
So this started with Carl Jung back with his work. This is when he started to split from Sigmund Freud. This is one of the areas that they started to disagree on.
Okay.
That Jung felt that there were these universally recognized patterns or constellations is the term he used, that we seem to understand almost instinctually. And that then became, it's not a word that is a very common word, but it became kind of this, another, like, a close example would be a symbol.
Okay.
But it's a symbol of many things, not just one thing. So it's all the things that father means, not just literally a definition.
Okay. So is it more like, to use the word father, and then what the attributes of the father are? So then could we think of it in terms of, like, the father would be up top, and then proceeding down below it would be the attributes that would uphold our ideas, or the ideal of father?
Sure. Yep. So if we said something like protector or parent, and then, like I said, the more specific the term gets, the more it starts to actually detract from the archetypalness of it.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's a symbol that's almost bigger than itself, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. So if you would just give us a brief overview of the 4 different masculine archetypes. And of course, they are warrior, magician, lover, and king.
Right.
So if you could just give us an overview first.
Right. Yeah. But also one specific one, and this is kind of how the book is introduced. They talk about boy archetype versus man archetype, which is important to understand.
Okay.
That the boy is not the fully developed man. And that's what they mean by mature masculine. So you have immature masculine, which is the boy, and the mature masculine, which is the man.
Okay.
And so in the mature masculine realm, or stage of life is another way to say that, you have these 4 archetypes that he believes, that the authors believe, and I agree, are more or less present in all men. So the king is kind of at the head or at the center of the archetypes. And their primary function is to make order of things. 2 functions. One is to make order of things. The other one is to have a sense of blessing or validation for yourself and others. The warrior function, the simple word is the doer, the one who takes the decision and then runs with it and is decisive. You've got the magician. I would say the magician is the knower, the intellect side of things. It can also have a spiritual aspect for sure, but in modern times with our kind of science-based culture, it's become a kind of a knower of technology being an easy example in modern times. And then the 4th is the lover, which often stands in contrast or even conflict with the others, which is the more heart side of us, our feelings, our emotions, things that many men would probably consider more feminine. Okay,
and you said that they're, if I heard you correctly, that they're at odds with the other 3?
Yes, the lover specifically, because the other 3, the king, the warrior, and the magician, tend to, so to speak, get along and are pretty complementary with each other. And then the lover comes along and throws the whole thing out of whack, which is a perfect example is you meeting a beautiful woman for the first time.
Okay.
You can have all your stuff together and be very confident and sure of yourself until the right woman walks along and you are smitten with her and it reorganizes the whole thing.
Okay. Wouldn't it be true to say that you have to have the king, warrior, and magician to be able to be the lover that you're supposed to be?
And vice versa. Yes.
Right.
So even though they can be in conflict, but they are totally necessary for each other. And that's why there are 4 of them. And a significant lack of any one of them is going to have the other 3 suffer.
Okay. So the goal, as far as is what they're putting out in the book, is the king, warrior, magician, and lover, that they would integrate.
Yes. That then and I like the term the authors use, they're in their fullness. They are what I would call expressed. They are fully expressed.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's dig into that a little bit more. You know, I look at these, and I've been sitting on it, and I see I see some of these ideas kind of fleshed out with the book Iron John from Robert Bly.
Definitely.
I see some of these ideas being fleshed out by John Eldridge's book, Fathered by God. I also see, because there was one of the archetypes where it talks about the hero. I can't remember which one that is. Is that the warrior or king?
Well, the hero, interestingly, this book so it's Joseph Campbell, who's kind of the hero of 1,000 Faces. He's a big one with the hero. His word for hero is a little bit differently than how these authors portray it.
Okay. Okay.
Right? So that's an interesting, that's its own discussion about what do we really mean by hero. Yeah.
Okay, good. I won't deviate from that then. All that was just to say that there's other ideas that kind of bring in similar concepts.
Sure.
And when I look at these 4 archetypes and that reflecting upon what I know about the Bible and reflecting upon the books that I've read, kind of, you know, in the man space, they use similar terminology. And for me, I was really drawn to this because I see this, and now I believe I can go into the 4 biographies in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I believe that Jesus was the perfect fulfillment of all of these. And going back and looking at those biographies and kind of seeing that, oh, okay, you know, if these things are true, then the psychologists were just verifying, honestly, what the Bible had already said, just thousands of years later. So,
right. Yeah, different points and I'm not terribly familiar with the Gospels, to be fair, but I can think of different points when Jesus seemed to have a fullness of a particular archetype in that moment.
Yeah.
Not to the exclusion of others by any means, but that was a king moment, or that was a lover moment for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've kind of looked at that too. And so the 4 pillars of my work are actually based off what a verse in the Bible actually says about Jesus. And I looked at what that verse said, that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So out of that Jesus grew in wisdom is intellect. He grew in stature, physical strength. He grew in favor with God, spiritual maturity, and in favor with man, relational integrity or maturity.
Okay.
So that's really the 4 pillars of my work. And then I was interested, to see how this book kind of coalesces with these pillars and kind of how they work together. And I can actually see some of these pillars throughout all of these archetypes.
Sure, definitely. And it's interesting, there are different pieces kind of weaving in and out of each of the ones that you said.
Yeah. So let's just, for the sake of the listener, we'll try and stay close to the surface as we can. But if we have to go deeper, we'll go deeper, and that's fine. If it's warranted, because I know this is rich stuff. So how would one apply the warrior?
How would one apply? Okay, so the warrior, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my personal take that it goes a little bit beyond the book.
Okay.
But also what the book talks about. So one of the things that the authors were concerned about, and interestingly, I would say since the book was written, the book's about, I think it's a good 30 years old.
Yeah, I think early 1980s, right?
Yeah. So it's even older than that. Yeah. That they were concerned that the warrior specifically was being repressed, that it was no longer called for. Because one of the things that the warrior can fall into is just that kind of that aggression of like, it's my way or the highway. I'm just going to come in here and do whatever I want, and I don't care about anyone else.
Okay.
that's an example of a warrior that is not listening to his other archetypes. So how you can develop the warrior, I would say, would be a sense of decisiveness. Like, once you have made a decision on something, to go with that decision. It's not saying that that decision can't be corrected or adjusted later on, but the lack of warrior energy is kind of like the over-analysis, which would be almost more magician.
Okay.
So to fully live in the warrior, from the book's perspective, is to take action and to take right action, as in you have decided in this situation what your values are, what is important to you, and now you're going to do the thing. You're going to do something about it.
Is there a movie that would show an accurate portrayal of a warrior? Just somebody either in health or I'll use the term health or unhealth, but in their strength, their stress or whatever. But is there a movie that people, that the guys could kind of have an image of that has to do with the warrior?
So I would say, for the record, this is a good king movie and a good warrior movie, in negative and positive ways. 300, the 300.
Okay.
It's when Leonidas decides that he and his men are going to go stand against the Persian king. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, well, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. He knows that if he delays, that army is on the move, and it's going to cost him and his people dearly. So once the decision is made, he picks his 300 men, and they are gone. They are committed to the ends of the earth for their cause. Hmm. Now, the committed to the cause is actually more of a king energy. That's deciding what the right of the right action is more king energy or king archetype. But the warrior is like, yep, I'm picking up my sword and my shield, and I'm defending my land, and that's the end of the story.
Okay, so the fact that Leonidas was the leader of that army, so he basically took on the kingship element, and then the rest of the 299 or 300, if it was 301 or 300 even, I'm not sure, but whatever the math is there for that, with the rest of them, they would have just been in the warrior archetype, correct?
Correct. Yep.
In that moment anyway, I mean.
In that moment, right. Who they are when they come back home to their wives, hopefully not so warriorship, right, but definitely on the field of battle.
Okay.
Another one, Saving Private Ryan. Like the men on the beach, and they're going to take that bunker. Yeah. That's warrior energy. And it's not like, well, how, maybe, but what will happen if we don't make it? No, like that's past the decision. The decision is made. We're taking that bunker, and here we go. Okay, what would the warrior archetype look like in its shadow form? Sure. So, and they do a good job of this. Each of the archetypes has a what they call a bipolar shadow. That is too much of it or not enough of it. Okay. So too much of a warrior becomes what they call, unfortunately, the sadist. So this is someone who is taking those actions for pure personal gain. Without, we talked about right action. Now we're just talking about action. I'm going to go, okay, so you have a lot of jokes on the internet now about, the whole toilet paper thing, right? Sure. So a sadist would be like, I'm just going to take all the toilet paper out of that store because I could use it. Right. And I have no consideration for anyone else. I've made my decision. I'm going up to the register. I've got the toilet paper. I can pay for it. I'm out the door. Just to be a jerk. Just to be a jerk because you can. Okay. Okay. You're exercising your strength, your might, financial, otherwise, simply because you can. So what would it look like on the other bipolar side, the other side of it, when there's not enough? When there's not enough, that's the masochist. Okay. So often what a masochist does is project that warrior energy onto someone else. And by doing so, they do the work, but they don't take the responsibility for it. Okay. And we have, unfortunately, a horrible but really good example of that as a country of Germany in World War II, the rise of the Nazi regime. Right. Okay. That's that masochist energy of like, well, I was just doing what I told. Yeah, but you've done these horrible things. And I think on some level, those people knew that they were doing horrible things. But the Fuhrer said, and the Fuhrer is the warrior making the decision, I'm just doing what he says. He's the quote unquote king. So. Right. Right. Okay. What about, I think about this, and this may not even fit into this part of the discussion, but I think about Rambo. Where would Rambo, I mean, when in modern day, since the 80s when that movie came out, people have an idea that, okay, that's, I was a little boy and I dreamt of being Rambo. Little did I know that he was screwed up
But like, he was all sorts of messed up, but there was something about him that was intriguing. And I just believe that other little boys like me just longed to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
Where would he have been in that spectrum?
So he is a good example of the warrior energy, but without the balance of the other sides.
Okay.
So another key facet of the warrior is a kind of detachment. You're not terribly concerned about the impact of your actions once you've made your decision.
So you're not empathetic. You're just almost robotic in your approach.
Right. And that gives you the strength of you are capable of these things that you probably weren't normally capable of. And you have a tremendous endurance. You have a tremendous tolerance for pain because you've decided you're going to do the thing and the thing is going to get done, no matter what. So that is a good example of warrior energy, but warrior energy, I wouldn't say he was a sadist, but out of balance in terms of not having the other archetypes to balance them out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and then I think about other maskers, that have happened, whether through the military or just in everyday life, and it has to be some misconstrual of warrior energy, right?
It's a good example of like, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should.
Yeah.
And
so lacking wisdom.
Right. The other archetypes come into play in terms of the king says, is this going to help the kingdom? Is this going to help the greater order? The lover says, what about the other guy? Who am I destroying? Who am I hurting? Who am I impacting by these actions?
I think most men, they form an idea. Once you hear warrior, there's something in them that they're like, I would really want to be one, or they say, I am one, or they're like, yeah, I really would like to be one, but I have no idea how to get there. So I think that part of the conversation is helpful just generally for men, because for us to kind of guide our way through figuring out, okay, being the warrior that you're supposed to be and using the fullness of that archetype. Well, what about the magician? The magician it's elusive. I choose that word very carefully, but just the term magician and elusive. And I'm like, that one seemed a little confusing to me. Could you clear some of that confusion up?
Sure. So I like the example that they gave in more modern terms of the magician. It's Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Star Wars episode, 3 and 4, but in that, yeah. So the magician is the part of you that has not necessarily secret, but knowledge that not everyone has.
Okay.
And in today's world, that can be something as simple as I know how to work a smartphone in the way other people don't. Or I know how to fix a car, or I know how to resuscitate someone, using CPR, for example. These kinds of specialized knowledge.
Like a hidden knowledge kind of thing?
Yeah, the hidden knowledge, right? And this is where it can also take on a spiritual aspect, because that can definitely also be spiritual knowledge.
Okay.
For example, you as a pastor, your knowledge of the Bible, and you sharing that with people in a way that provides insight and support and wisdom and instruction, whatever, I would definitely say that's your magician.
Okay. That helps in that regard. Mm-hmm. So how would one integrate the magician with the others?
Sure. So it's to remember, that you have your own knowledge, that you have these, I wouldn't say they were unique in terms of nobody else, but nobody else probably has your combination of skills and knowledge. And it's how do you express those into the world? How do you share with the world the knowledge that you've gained? So there's an example of the shadow magician is the manipulator.
Okay.
So now you do have that knowledge, but it's used for ill-gotten gains. The example I like there is like insider trading. You happen to find out that, in 2 days that company's going to collapse. And so you dump all your stock of that company. 2 days later, it collapses. Everyone else takes a huge hit, but you walk away with a ton of money. Okay. That is knowledge that you could have shared and chose not to. So they call that the manipulator. So
greed would be a big driver for the manipulator, bipolar shadow side of that. Right. Now, what's on the other side?
Unfortunately, some of the, are you familiar with like the pickup community, that kind of thing?
Yes.
So some of the techniques I think that they use to try to to try to sadly trick women or manipulate them to get what they want, but they're not actually going to give them probably the kind of like mature, masculine, long-term relationship that they might be looking for.
Gotcha. So they're putting on a false front to say, I'm this kind of man, but really it's just to literally have sex with them or to get whatever they want from them and then just jet. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Exactly. You know, if two consenting adults on a one-night stand, that to me is a completely different. But if you're setting yourself up as I'm perfect boyfriend material and I'm pushing all the right buttons for her to get what I want, and then as soon as I get it, I leave, that feels manipulative.
Right. Or a guy
that pick-up knowledge, that secret knowledge of the techniques and whatever to do that.
Yeah. I get it. And if a guy is trying to manipulate and say he's trying to manipulate the girl and try and pull her away from her friends or her family, and that way he can control her, would that be fair to say that that's the one of the bipolar sides of the magician as well?
Yep. So I think like on a grander scale, and sadly, unfortunately, this does happen more than we probably know, like cult leaders. That's a good example of a manipulative magician.
Yeah.
They claim this secret knowledge about whatever, the end of the world or spiritual or something like that. Or a guru who is seducing his female or she's seducing her male clients with, I'm going to show you the secret yoga knowledge, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So just come to me. I'm the wise one. I'm the guru for ill-gotten gain, not necessarily even to help the person, but to lift up their own platform.
Sure.
Could you think of I'm sorry.
I was just going to say a healthy example of this, an amazing world-changing example, I think, is the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh, yeah.
Like Jesus certainly had, special knowledge of some kind. And rather than like try to manipulate someone or, try to make some sort of a deal or something like that, he literally just sits down to whoever wants to listen. That's just beautiful.
Right.
I'm just going to sit down with whoever wants to listen and begin talking and sharing what I know.
Yeah.
And you can join if you'd like. That's good magician energy.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great example. And I even think about with Jesus, when he would talk about the kingdom of God, that was new information at the time. And that was really the thing that he talked about more than salvation or heaven or hell or anything else, was the kingdom of God. And he would say it over and over and over, the kingdom of God is like, or the kingdom of heaven. And then he would talk about the kingdom of the world and those kind of, juxtaposing those two ideas. And I guess that would even be in that realm, that archetype is, when he would talk about the kingdom of God, it's new information, but he wasn't keeping it exclusive to himself. He was putting it on offer for his listeners, like in the Sermon on the Mount. He was basically telling us what reality was, and that was his secret knowledge.
Right.
Whereas the audience hearing it, and then us today, if you read the Bible, it's like, this is what reality is, and he's letting us in on this magician for keeping the same terminology. Right? Yeah. Interesting. I wouldn't have put that together. Now, what about the lover? I know there's a twisted side to this one. I believe there is anyway. So there can be in one of the bipolar sides of the work that I did, and I could be getting my wires crossed, but tell us about the lover archetype.
So the lover archetype, now in the warrior, so there are a couple of different ones that I feel are more like a body oriented. And this is kind of my take on the work, kind of expanding on what the authors talked about. I would say the warrior is more of a body archetype in that it's that strength, that inner strength that then becomes physical strength of like, all right, we're going to go do this. We're going to go get this done. On a very simple level, it's like, all right, we need to get that sofa up those stairs. And you put your back into it, roll up your sleeves, and you go and do it. That's warrior energy as kind of manifested in strength. So the body energy of the lover, though, is definitely different. So that's more of the sensation, the appreciation of beauty.
Okay.
I think a lot of guys access that, whether they realize it or not, when they listen to a song that moves them, or they read a poem, or a beautiful woman, or a beautiful car, or an amazing sunset. All those things are the manifestation of the lover energy.
Yeah, I was thinking even, of just going outside. I love being outside, and went on a run earlier and just kind of running in the woods, and it was just kind of enjoying that creation. Would that be in the same realm?
Yes. So that's a great example of, like, in this case, a warrior and the lover energies, archetypes combined. So the warrior says, all right, putting on our shoes, we're going for a run. You can always come up with the reasons why not to, but you've made that decision. You've engaged your body in it. The appreciation of the run and the outdoors in the forest, I would say, was the lover.
Okay. Okay. So what would the lover, what would that look like in a movie? Like the healthiest, the fullest version that we can come up with. What would that look like in a movie? Something that we can relate to.
So there's kind of, I think of like Rhett Butler and Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
So there's a man that stands with it himself and is like, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. And he deeply loves Scarlett O'Hara.
Mm-hmm.
So he stands in his fullness of like, yep, I totally have it for you. And I'm not losing myself. I'm not abandoning myself, which can be kind of how the lover can fall. And one of the more shadow aspects is like almost like this obsessive of like, oh, I have to have her and I'm going to send her 10,000 text messages today, right? But the lover in his fullness is like, I am potent, I am passionate, here I am, and I want you to be with me.
Okay. So, so where would the fascination and addiction with porn, where would that go into, into the realm of the lover? Because it sounds like it's there, but I just haven't heard it said.
Sure. So that's an interesting, and I think that's part of the reason why it's so prevalent and powerful. It speaks to both sides of the shadow of the lover. It speaks to the addictive or the active side, the too much side of like, you just can't get enough. You watch 6 videos today, you're watching 8 videos tomorrow, you're watching 12 by Friday, and pretty soon all of your free time is taken up doing this. And you can't get enough of her body or whatever the act is, or any of those things, right? You just more, and it becomes an addiction. That's the active side. Combined with the passive side, which is what they call more of the impotence. Like you're not actually really feeling her and feeling your body with her. You probably are trying to cover up for something that probably doesn't feel good within you. Anxieties, fear, depression, things like that. And so you're not quite in your fullness as a man of like, this is who I am. But then you access the porn and get hooked on that as a way to try to.
Okay. So it's with the shadows, it's a shortcut from the work required to reach fullness. Is that right?
Right. A lot of times there's a responsibility that comes with the fullness. Like to be in the fullness of your lover is to fully love your partner, but not to be obsessed with them.
Right.
You still have 3 other parts of, the warrior and the magician and the king that have some stuff to do and make an impact in the world. So it's not that you love your partner any less, but that's a part of your life, not all of your life. And I love the idea that like, hey, look, when I'm at work, that is my warrior and probably my magician mode of like, I'm getting things done. I know things. I'm applying. I'm sharing what I know. But then when I come home, it's time to set those aside a bit and let the lover, let that fine, good dinner, the smell of that overtake you. Just appreciate the sway of your wife or your girlfriend's hips.
So it sounds like, and maybe I'm just projecting here, but it sounds like that the lover is the one that a lot of guys are detached from.
Absolutely. And this is why it stands in conflict, because the other 3 are easily detached.
Okay.
I can just talk about how I know about, in my case, computers all day. I don't have to feel a thing. I can decide that I'm going to go lift weights and just kind of go through the motions and be robotic about that. As a king, I can work on ordering my world and doing the right things, but there's no heart in it. There's no me in it. I'm just kind of going through the motions of what I think should happen.
I'm a incredibly huge proponent for men receiving the healing that they need. And started some coaching now, and that's kind of launching my own path in that regard. And that's really what makes me tick is to see men get it and to go through and to receive some healing and kind of step into some of these archetypes. But that seems to be the one you said that you said they were all easily detached, but that the lover is detached from the other 3. And I don't know, it just seems like that there's got to be some reason why the other 3, that we can kind of live in those as strengths, but yet maybe we fear the vulnerability in the lover.
Yep. And I think this is where you see a lot of of violence against women.
Right.
Again, unfortunately, sadly, violence against women and homophobia.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that has to do with a man's inability to accept his own lover. That 3/4 of the time, so to speak, he can live in this kind of detached, relatively manly kind of macho world, and he doesn't have to feel.
Right.
But in doing so, then he doesn't have empathy or compassion for other people. He can't appreciate the beauty of a woman or the world or the
Right.
meal that he just had. And so you will have a successful life, but it will feel very empty. I think of like a successful CEO has probably got those other 3 archetypes on lock, but he's a wreck at home, right?
Right.
His marriage is a shambles. He's probably, or hopefully not, but he's probably cheating on his wife, doesn't have a good relationship with his kids. Yeah, his lover is out to lunch.
Yeah, and I see and hear a lot about this too, that men, they get the accolades and the applause at work. So, and then they feel like a failure at home, probably because obviously they have a big part to play in that. But maybe it's the lack of connection, empathy, and compassion. All of that is, that drives them to then stay at work. And when they stay at work, they get applause and they get raises and, hey, we worked overtime tonight. And, and if you're in a position of authority, then you have the little stroke of your ego.
Sure.
So then it's like, well, they really appreciate me at work. And it seems like, anyway, then it just validates the other 3 archetypes while betraying the lover.
Yep. Because the lover, it's, that idea of the conflict comes from because it operates on such a different spectrum. That idea of the feeling and kind of almost the softness, and not femininity literally, but there's a feminine aspect of us that needs to be accessed in order to be, successful in the lover realm. You talked earlier about the integration. So the lover needs to be integrated as well. It's what I like to say, it's what keeps us human.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, because this is relationship. This is the relational pillar. This is, it's all of that. It's connecting, it's empathy, it's compassion, it's service to others, which I'm a huge, huge advocate of. And I talk about it all the time. And whether I talk to people who served in the military and law enforcement, or now, if they serve in their community, I'm like, I just, I tip my hat to them, because I think service is such a huge part of what a man should be about. And if they're saturated with self and betraying it sounds like anyway, they're betraying the lover archetype, they're not going to be that servant leader that they could be.
No, because they've lost the good whys of why to do that thing. So I think in the stories of Jesus, I think of the lover moment of like the washing of the feet.
Yeah.
But it's a very personal, sensual, and that kind of, that connected to your body kind of a feeling. That, yeah, we're providing knowledge, we're doing amazing things, and we're teaching people and all of that. And then there's that simple service, loving act of washing someone else's feet. He did that too, right?
Yeah. And I think even, the healings that he did, just honoring the human being in front of him. And then when he would offer up a healing, I guess that would be in the same regard.
Right.
Excellent.
I think his moment of the crucifixion and asking God to forgive the people is a lover kind of act. He has compassion for the people, even though they've done these horrible things. He still has compassion for who they are and what they're about. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. So the only one we haven't talked about is the king. Well, everybody wants to be the king. And a lot of people think they are the king. So how can a man grow into this archetype?
Right. So I like an expression they use from the book that helps us to understand when we're talking about kingliness and being the king.
Okay.
And it's an expression that they would have in medieval times, back when there were kings more frequently, which was the king is dead, long live the king. Which is, the king is more of a cause that you inhabit somewhat temporarily, versus like, this is who you are and you're in charge of everyone else.
Okay.
So especially in the modern time, the king is a cause.
Okay.
The king is a set of beliefs of what you were about in the world.
Let me just ask you this, because
Mhm.
I've been watching The West Wing, so that's where this is coming from, and I can't get enough of The
Mhm.
West Wing right now. That is like the show that when I want to watch TV, or when I get to watch TV, that's what I want to watch. So that's where this is coming
Mhm.
from. So West Wing has to do with the White House, the presidency. Would would people maybe even disagreeing with the president, but yet they honor the presidency? Would that be an
Exactly.
example of that?
Yep, exactly. Right. Honoring the station of the office and not always necessarily agreeing with the person holding that office is part of what that is.
Yes.
And so when we're saying the king, you have the kingdom of your life. You have, maybe your family or your siblings, your wife, your children, the people where you work with at your job. That is a kingdom in this kind of way, in this
Hmm.
archetype way. Yes, I understand you don't literally walk around necessarily with a crown. Yeah, but you kind of do in your own life.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. So I just started thinking about my time in the Navy, and then when a commissioned officer would, give you an order. Well, for one, if you were to see them out in public, out in the open, not in a closed room, you'd have to give them a salute, and then they would salute back. You don't let your salute go until they release theirs, and then you address them, sir or ma'am, and if they tell you to do something, it's yes sir, yes ma'am, and then you just do it.
Right. Right.
And so if I'm hearing this correctly, Michael, and if I'm not, please stop me. It sounds like even when a man operates under the authority of a king, he's operating in a kingly way.
Yes, he is. Absolutely. Yes.
Hmm.
Yep. In his own way, that is to respect the kingdom around him.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's great and really helpful, especially for young guys or maybe even teenagers who may be listening right now, because you know if you were to look at this and from where you are as a young man, you're a teenager or just in your 20s or maybe in your 30s, and maybe your tendency is to push back against authority, and you just have that personality, you just grind against authority.
Right.
When you actually submit to that authority, you're actually, when you honor the king, you're actually showing yourself to be kingly. It's when
Yes.
we disagree, we're actually defying our growth area.
Potentially, like that. Then in that moment of respect and somewhat obedience, but it's more like being respectful.
Yes.
You then start to gather the own respect that others have of you. That I believe becomes king energy, especially as you grow older.
Hmm.
You've learned respect for others, and thus you gain the respect of those around you.
Hmm. So what would a good example in a movie look like of somebody who is operating as a king in the fullness?
Mm. King in fullness. I mentioned King Leonidas,
Mm-hmm.
who not only does this warrior energy of needing to fight and hold back the forces of Persia, but also the leadership of his men. That um, he is instructing them in the right thing. What is the right thing to do in this moment? And leading by example. I believe that that's a key part of king energy as well. It's not just telling someone what to do, it's that leadership by example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think of Gladiator. It sounds like that would be a
Mhm.
good example, probably an example of a few of them actually. Uh,
Yeah. And some shadow ones as well. A good example of I don't remember the character's name. Uh,
Maximus, right?
Maximus. Yep, Maximus is the gladiator, and then who is the Caesar that he is standing against? Uh,
Um, oh, it's
it's
Joaquin
Joaquin
Phoenix.
Phoenix, isn't it?
Yeah, I
Know
know
his
it's Joaquin
name.
Phoenix. I can't think of his name, but it's Joaquin Phoenix.
Right. So he is a good example of the active side of the king energy, which is the tyrant,
Okay.
who is simply ruling almost, it seems like, on a whim for his
Hmm.
own personal gain, maybe the gain of others, but really his own personal gain.
Hmm. Okay.
And we see that a lot, unfortunately, in modern politics. I think the president struggles with this particular shadow.
Hmm.
Not to get political, but like that's just an easy thing for me to see because oftentimes it does feel like he's reversed his course and chosen something else, and it almost feels like it's on a whim. And I obviously don't have the inner workings of the presidency, but it does seem like that tyrant energy of something that he kind of falls into from time to time.
So
and certainly others. Nancy Pelosi does as well.
Right.
It's almost like they get a bit full of their station and decide, you know what, I'm just going to do this because I can, and I'm just because I say so.
Mm.
Not because it is a good thing, a right action thing to do.
So where does pride and ego, where does it kind of intervene in the shadows?
Mm-hmm. Where if we start to get too much a sense of ourselves and not enough of the beliefs and who we are serving, that I don't think pride itself necessarily, but pride can lead to this.
Mm-hmm.
You can be overly prideful, especially in a king and a warrior energy, and even a magician energy, of, well, I know better, so you should just do what I say because I know better.
Right.
You can see this almost every day at work. The guy who comes along who knows about the certain thing that not many people do,
Mm.
and they believe because he knows about that special knowledge that he just must be right.
Mm. I think of two different things. I think of an Enneagram 1 and I think of an Enneagram 5. I'm an Enneagram 1. That's what I've typed out at. And I think that over the years that I've been familiar with Enneagram, that seems consistent. And I think that could be a shadow that I battle with, because I see things as broken. So if when I go into a room, if something is off, I'm somebody who sees the world like I do, we're probably going to see it before anybody else. And not the secret knowledge. That's more of like a Enneagram 5. That's somebody who's kind of like, knowledge is king. They've got this hidden knowledge. And if they let you have that hidden knowledge, then they've got to find some other knowledge, because hidden knowledge is power. Yeah. Sure. So it's kind of like grasping. But yeah, so I see some of, like, I guess myself operating in that shadow of, because I see things as broken and I'm like, I just want to help you. Don't you see that this is broken? Don't you see that you're broken? Don't you see this is what's going on? And I really have to pull myself back and stay tethered to God ultimately, because I can be way out front and be like, tell people stuff that they just they're not ready to hear. They don't want to hear. So I have to kind of like reel all of that back in. And it sounds like that's the shadow.
It can be. I like its example from the book that they use of a tyrant, a shadow king, is King Herod.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Where he has pretty much said, you know what, this is because I say so, and this is all kind of a charade, and it's all kind of preordained that this is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. Without really having any empathy or understanding, or even trying to understand what's actually really happening.
Yeah. So how can, as we close this up, how can a man become more kingly in that archetype? How can he grow in that archetype?
To understand, first of all, that you are that when you're inhabiting this archetype, that you are the station of the king. To respect the office, as we were talking about. Mm-hmm. That you are not necessarily the king, and nor do you have to be, but you are a king of your world and what you are working on. Mm-hmm. So, and I like a couple of the functions of the king that help us to develop the king archetype. One is the sense of ordering. Mm. That this is one that men are especially strong at. That, you know what, we need to take a step back. Let's really think this through. Let's get this down to a component parts. Let's build a list of what needs to be done, and then we're going to go do it. That's a good example of that kingly ordering energy. But hopefully, in a chaotic meeting, someone says, whoa, slow down. Let's take this apart. Let's look at it, and let's figure out what needs to be done. Mm-hmm. That's a good example. Another one, another key piece of it that I think is kind of missed a lot of times in these discussions is the idea of benevolence, or the idea of blessings, which is that's inhabiting more of the father energy. But we can do that with a coworker or with our spouse. Like, wow, this is a really good. I just had dinner, so this is a really good dinner. I really appreciate you taking the time to make this meal, right? And watch your wife presumably just light up.
Right.
That's that king, giving his blessing of this meal.
Yeah. Excellent. And I think about, there's so many ways to do that with our kids, to affirm them and just to bless them and affirm them. When I think of blessing and affirmation, it seems like they both kind of land in this area But when I hear the word blessing, for me, blessing has to do with personhood, and then affirmation has to do with performance.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a son and a daughter, and when I go to my son and I say, man, son, I love you. I really appreciate you. You don't have to do anything. You wouldn't have to do anything for me to love you more. That's a blessing, because it's not based off performance. Now, if my son's 23, so if he, and he's in the Georgia Army National Guard right now. So if he were to go and, be picked to go to some elite school and then be first in his class getting out of the school, then I would affirm him and I'd say, man, that's awesome. You did really, really well in that class. I'm proud of you. That's not based off of personhood. I've separated personhood from performance. Both are important, but yet if you intermix the two, then you can really kind of scramble your kids up, honestly.
Right. So it's reminding them, and who are you that is the person reminding them? That's your king energy.
Yeah.
And then it sounds funny, like your servant. He's not really your servant, but someone in your kingdom has done good for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And you are acknowledging that. You are grateful for that. You are letting them know that this is something good.
Yeah. So a king, he there's a rule of order that he creates. He's caring for those in his kingdom, at least in the fullness they should be.
Right.
And if they're not, then they're going to land in one of these two bipolar shadows.
Right. So the other side just is the weakling. So a lot of times the king in his weakling state is, and you can see this with kind of the paranoia. And I think this happens a lot at work.
Okay.
Where you have a boss that is concerned that some other boss is going to take the resources. So he starts acting out in strange ways, not making good decisions that are really for the good of himself or the team, but kind of seemed like the right idea at the time, and it ended up kind of going sideways. That would be kind of that weakling. So you're still your king of your kingdom, whether or not, frankly, your kingdom is doing well, and it's still your responsibility. And that's kind of the other side of the weakling is, again, they kind of abdicate that responsibility.
Yeah, that's challenging.
Well, I tried, but it's John's fault. John was the one that decided it. Where was your king in that said, you know what, that's not the right thing to do. We need to move this other direction.
Yeah, that's challenging, because at the end of the day, you are the king of your kingdom. Even if you are the only person who's actually a participant in your kingdom at that time, maybe you don't have that sphere of leadership or authority or family yet. And so at the end of the day, you are the king of your kingdom. So the question is, what are you doing as a king?
Right.
Because it's there. You're either doing it well or you're not doing it well. But if you go on the weakling side of it too, it sounds like that there could be almost just kind of passing off the leadership, almost just a passive way of looking at it. And maybe because who knows? I mean, there could be a bunch of reasons why they end up. Maybe they didn't have a strong role model growing up. Maybe they were raised by mother and grandmother, and they just lacked that man.
Like you see those guys at work, or I have seen guys at work who they're checking in with the boss for every single little decision to be made. Well, we ordered 6, but maybe we should order 7, or maybe we should only order 5. I don't know. Better check with the boss. And they check with the boss about everything. Yeah, they've abdicated any responsibility of their position, which is their kingdom at work. And suddenly, the boss is getting frustrated with them because it's like, look, I'm empowering you to make some decisions here. Yeah, for the big stuff, yeah, come to me. But within your own little kingdom of your job, that needs to be done. And a perfect example of this is also like leading at home. And I even talk about with men of this about dating. Traditionally, certainly have her input, but I think it's good for you to decide where you're going to take her to dinner. Take that kingly role. Well, what if she doesn't like sushi? Okay, then she'll tell you, and then you'll choose something else.
Right.
But don't abdicate the responsibility of that to her, because now she's the king. She doesn't want to be the king. She wants you to be the king.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. And then it's also being aware and conscious, right? Being present in the moment. So that's such a silly, but yet such a practical example. It's like, where are you going to go eat? The first time you may not have a clue on the type of food. It's your first date. You don't know. So just pick a whatever, a restaurant that's going to have just a bunch of different, types of cuisine. But then the more that you know about the person, the more that you should be, the more that a man should be learning about the woman that says, yeah, I remember she told me she didn't like sushi.
Right.
We're not doing sushi. You know what? She's a steak and potatoes kind of gal. Okay.
Right.
Good to know.
So I think this is a cool exercise. We can use all four in that particular decision.
Cool.
That where to go to dinner. The lover says, I'm paying attention to my potential partner. I'm listening to her. I care about her. Oh, she mentioned that she doesn't like sushi and she likes steak. Got it. Then the magician will come along and say, all right, I'm going to research all the great steak restaurants and I'm going to find the perfect romantic steak restaurant, get on Yelp, do your Google thing, whatever, and get the place, right? Then the king says, all right, the right action is we're going to invite her out to dinner. And then combined with a warrior, you actually go do that. You call her, text her, whatever it is. You say, hey, I found a perfect steak restaurant for us to go to on Friday night. I have reservations at 7:00. Let's go.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's a really good way for us to close it up too, because bringing all four of those, they're incredibly practical.
Yeah, they apply in everyday life. And, we were kind of using maybe, like you're a king, you're a magician. What do you mean? No, it's everyday life. They're just examples of this kind of this energy, of this symbol.
Yeah. Love that. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your experience in education. I believe that we talked about some things that the guys can just put into practice right now. And I believe that we talked about it at a certain level to where it's not so academic or clinical to where we lost them. But if we did, they can listen to it again, right? And take notes.
Right. So, and go check out the book by all means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will put the book in the show notes. And I am going to read the book. I'm committing today that I'm going to read this book. Now, when, I don't know. I've got a backlog of books, but I will read that book. And maybe I'll bring you back on and maybe I'll have even a little bit more to add into the equation. So
great. Would love to.
But for now, I just want to say, Michael, thank you so much for your time and just sharing with us on the podcast. And how can guys get connected with you?
Sure. A couple different ways. I have theprimalbrotherhood.com/sign up. You can sign up for my email list, get more information about these archetypes, how they work, the shadows, things like that, and contact me about potentially coaching as well, something they're interested in. I can also be found on Facebook under Coach Michael Pfaff.
Cool. Yep. I'll link all that up and we'll get the word out.
Excellent. Great.
So it's been great. Thank you so much. Look forward to more conversations in the later and hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. You too. Have a good one.